Welcome back to the UK Forum on the Multipolar World. Today we're talking to Will Stone, MP for Swindon North, about the UK domestic defence industry and the work he's been doing in Parliament and around the country on that issue. It's very nice to speak to you.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here and chatting to you. Thank you for doing it.
Thanks very much. Okay, so the first question I've got, I'm going to just jump straight in on a sort of topical question. Obviously, we recently had the resignation of the Defence Secretary, John Healey. I was wondering what your reaction to that was and what you think it says about the government's current position in terms of defence spending and UK defence and security.
Yeah, we also had the resignation of Al Khan's as well, so it was kind of double whammy. To be honest, it's very hard for me as a backbench MP who hasn't seen the dip to disagree with two individuals that have seen the dip. So at this moment in time, if the people who've been around the table are saying there's not enough money for defence spending, I have to concur with that until I've got any evidence to show otherwise. So it's not ideal. I think we need to revisit it. I have the utmost respect for Dan Jarvis. He's a veteran himself and he's a very straight talking, clear individual. I'm hoping part of the negotiations for him taking on that role were we need more money for defence.
Yeah, and what do you see as the sort of different perspectives within the government and also within the Labour Party on defence spending? What are the people who are pushing back on increasing defence spending in line with what John Healey and others want saying?
So I think some of the time, as we're an island nation, we don't always realise how vulnerable and how hostile the world is at this moment in time. So I think there are some people that are a little shouted from that view and they might want to spend the money on other things. I still fundamentally think there is a way that we can fund defence and do things differently without making massive cuts. So I think we need to be having those conversations, like how can we start using pension funds to invest in legacy products and things of that nature. I think there's more conversations that need to be had. But I would say it's not necessarily people don't want to invest in defence. I think they don't have the cognitive understanding of how hostile the world is and how underprepared we are, which is concerning.
Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe coming off the back of that subject, you've recently launched and been elected chair of the Cross-Party Parliamentary Group to strengthen the UK's defence supply chain. Could you just talk me through the motivations behind that? Maybe that is alluded to in what you've just talked about. Who's involved in the group and what is the group hoping to achieve?
Yeah, so obviously I spend a lot of time engaging with industry and going out and talking to SMEs, and it's been made apparent to me on multiple occasions that we are not ready for mass scale up. There's a difference being able to produce 100 drones to we need to produce 6,000 drones because we are at war. So the fundamentals behind that was how do we scale up if the worst case scenario happens? Be that the availability of good skilled, well-trained people to do the jobs, the availability of critical minerals, the availability of land itself. So how do we make it work? I'm working in collaboration with Make UK, obviously Britain's largest trade body. They've been fantastic and they've provided us a part-time secretariat to help with the reports. So we've also got some really, really smart people, way smarter than me around the table. So we've got Major General Mark Lancaster's on board with it. We've got Lord Epsom, we've got Lord Sharp. So there's some smart minds looking at it. But essentially, I am worried that the country's not where it needs to be. I want to put forward strategic reports to government to get us to that position is the aim. Okay,
thank you very much. And again, staying on the topic of defence and defence spending, I recently interviewed Julian Lindley-French, who's a former MOD and NATO advisor. And in the interview, he described defence primes as rentiers on the state. I just wondered what you would say to that remark, and what do you see as the key issues in the current UK defence industry?
Yeah, so It's a tricky one, right? So I am obviously a champion for novel tech and reforming how we do things as a military. Of course I am. But I'm also acutely aware of the fact that a lot of new companies don't have the capacity to build legacy products. Like GCAP is going to be fantastic, right? This is not just the product itself and what it can do. International relationships that we can open up with Japan off the back of this program will last. If the program fails, that will trade routes with Japan. It will impact our relationship. So there is a place for primes. There's always going to be a place for primes, but we need to look at how we create an environment where smaller companies, which are doing fantastic innovative stuff, can get access and can get a piece of the cake. Because sometimes it's more who you know and how your lobbying power goes as to what contracts get out there, as opposed to the best possible kit and equipment. So we need to rebalance it. But I'm not just going to talk down the primes, because I think they do have a place to play, and I think we just need sometimes them to be a little bit more agile.
Thanks very much. And I'll come back to some of the engagement you've done with SMEs in the UK in a bit. But just again on the sort of general context of the UK's defence industry, I've seen in things you've written before that you've advocated for more government-industry cooperation on the defence industry. Why do you think this is so difficult for the government and for governments of different colours over recent decades? And do you think there needs to be a bit of a change of thinking on this? I think you, again, alluded to this in one of your previous answers, but yeah, is there need to be a change of mindset on this question?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we also need to reevaluate what we want as a country and what we want our armed forces to look like. You know, I think, not to criticize previous governments, red or blue, but we've sometimes taken an American approach to defense spending when we don't have the same bank as America. You know, like I've done a lot of looking at what other countries do, and I think we should be trying to work to a similar procurement/export market, how France do it, for example. Their armed forces are significantly better equipped than our armed forces, yet they have a very similar spending power. So I think we have to change that sort of cultural mindset of what do we want to do and what do we want to be and how do we fund it. I also think something we spoke about earlier, the public perception to it. Because ultimately, parties want to stay in power so they can enact the policies that they want to. If they aren't popular with the public, they're not going to stay in power. And if the public's not got defence in the forefront of their mind, they're less likely to support it. So we need to do a better job as politicians. The defence industry needs to do a better job, and armed forces, like actually telling the public how it is and what is going on, you know. And that's a little bit. So with my messaging around Swindon, it's always been around creating economic growth, securing good quality jobs, and supporting the nation's security, because those are pillars I think most people can get behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to talking about Swindon in a bit. And this is another topical question, and I believe it also came up in relation to the Defence Secretary's resignation recently. And you also wrote to the Prime Minister, I believe, on this subject. Why do you think the government has not taken up Prime Minister Mark Carney's Defence Security and Resilience Bank idea, and why do you think they're reticent to be more closely involved with this?
I have no idea. Like genuinely, it seems like a no-brainer. Some of the conversations I've had with other MPs who are in the defence sort of like-minded group have said that the invitation wasn't a firm commitment on funds. They just wanted the UK to get in the door so we can start having those conversations. I'm still pushing for it. I think it would be a terrible decision to be left out of it, to be honest with you. So I don't know. There could be some inner workings with Treasury that there's a reason, but to my knowledge, I think it's a good idea, and I think we are stronger together and we need to work with our allies. So I think we should try and get involved.
Yeah, thanks very much. And the Treasury has been, mentioned a lot recently in terms of defence spending and the role that they've been playing. Do you think that their approach to the questions of sort of tax and spend around defence spending needs to be looked at again, especially in the context of the role of things like SMEs in the UK and their potential to create growth?
Yeah, no, I do. I think there needs to be a better hand-holding process for helping companies scale up. I think there needs to be more acknowledgement from the Treasury of the potential that companies can have. So we've got some of the most fantastic minds in the country, sorry, in the world. Like we have Cambridge, we have Oxford, we have genuinely brilliant entrepreneurial spirit who have great academic backgrounds. And I see a lot of people fluttering off to the United States because that's the only way they can make their company work. So we have to address what is the disparity and why companies can't get the support they need to scale up. Because we should be looking for that. Like, obviously, I'm incredibly grateful of the companies that have come into Swindon, but out of all of them, only one of them is a British company. You know, and I think there's that double whammy as well. It's like, yes, companies are paying tax. Yes, they're employing people. Yes, they're making great product. But if you have a British company, it does all those things, and then when it goes on the stock market, that money comes back into the UK as well. So there's kind of like, we need to work out how we can do it. I think there's been some really good examples like Cambridge Aerospace, that they're leveling up and they're doing fantastic. So we can do it. Rowden's the first, I think we'll say, new company to prime on a defence contract. So we can do it. It's just maybe take some good lessons from them and how we apply it to the rest of industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks very much. And I'm also interested, especially considering the recent all-party parliamentary group, where do you see the support from other parties coming from? What conversations have you had with colleagues from other parties? And where do you think the sort of political culture in Westminster sits in terms of the question of the UK's defence supply chain and the role of, or increasing the role of domestic industries?
So the all-party parliamentary group consists of me, a couple of Labour MPs, and then lots of Tory peers. So I think when it comes to defence, most of the main parties can get behind trying to transition and ensure that our armed forces gets adequately funded. It doesn't seem as politically hostile, to be honest. I've got some really fantastic relations with some Tory peers that I am incredibly grateful that they're putting their brain in to try and fix this problem with me. So I'm coming at it as a, how do we fix the problem, not what party you're in. I think there's certain things we need to take the politics out of and think it's the nation's security. What is the best possible way to work together? So it's not too politically hostile, to be honest.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, that's great. And I think we've seen in recent years, especially, the definition of defence and security really being expanded to questions around economics, supply chains, even international development. Where else do you think there needs to be more attention or more work being done on where the UK stands in terms of its security that is maybe not necessarily in hard military power, but in other forms of power and other institutions?
So there's so much you get through soft power, all right? And you can, if we're going to take away industrial trading and stuff from that nature, you can use the armed forces as a soft power. Like when I was in the army, we did training with other nations. That might seem like a minimal thing or a jolly, you know, like doing training with the Indian army or the Kazakhstan army, but that's soft power in itself, you know. And using our institutions like the Defence Academy at Swindon to invite people over, that's also soft power. Like, you might be training someone up who's a captain in the Egyptian army, but they might be a general in the future. So I think using our defence and using the armed forces to help other nations prepare for war as well and prepare for peacekeeping operations, but at the same time, that is a soft power. Obviously, there's soft power through foreign aid and diplomacy. There's also soft power on going joint exercises. Like, we had a joint naval exercise with the Japanese. That was part of the reason our ship wasn't ready to deploy as quickly as we would have liked when the Iran conflict kicked off. But that was an important thing. Doing a naval show of force with the Japanese when they are at the front line, you could say, in dealing with China pushing constantly in oceans is important. So training, working together, cooperation, and foreign aid are probably the best ones you can do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And you mentioned events in the Middle East there, and I suppose an awful lot has happened in terms of international relations since you've become an MP. And I was just wondering, what do you think the implications of those events be it in Iran or other policy decisions by the Trump administration when it comes to the UK's domestic defence industry and how we think about security?
It's very challenging because fundamentally, I would say that was a poor decision. You know, militarily wise, a couple months prior, they had said they had destroyed Iran's nuclear capability. So to go back into a war with no, in my perspective, plausible way of ending said conflict is poor. Like, everybody knows if you attack Iran, they are going to go ballistic in the nation, they're going to close the Strip of Hormuz, and they're going to bomb your allies. Like, they're not secretive about that. That is their approach to war. We also know that how the Iranian regime and military operates, cutting off the snake, head of the snake, does not stop the show. You know, each commander can operate under their own guides as a cell. So taking out the Ayatollah is, they could say that's a military victory, but it's not going to stop the Strip of Hormuz being closed. So that is incredibly challenging. It obviously has played havoc with oil prices, fertilizer, which has global impacts. It's also meant that certain countries are buying oil from Russia instead, which is helping fund their war efforts. So there's so many knock-on effects. As for defense, I would say it has highlighted the fact that we do not have adequate counter UAV across the world. We're spending the Americans mainly are spending far too much money on taking out new novel tech, the Shahed drone, with legacy equipment, and that is a concern. So I think seeing those holes firsthand gives us the ability to fill them and start working on how do we get that. You know, I'd imagine that there's going to be a lot of people looking at how do we purchase more of the Octopus drones from the Ukrainians, because 2 of those can take out Shahed. It's been proven. So it's highlighted the holes in our system and how we need to invest in different technology. But it has destabilized a lot of the world, and it is worrying.
And just before this interview, you told me that you were going forward today for an election. Is it to be a representative for the Organisation of Security Cooperation in Europe?
Yeah.
If you were to get that role, what would you like to do with it? What would be your priorities? And yeah, where would you like to focus on in that role?
So I think cooperation obviously is the main one, working with other countries across Europe, and basically how do we secure Europe without relying on other nations' support is a big one. And I think that comes from assessing the capacities of each nation so we're not duplicating each other's homework. So for example, I went out to the NATO Defence Eastern Flank Conference in Poland, and the Polish are doing a phenomenal job. They're investing in tanks, they're buying lots of kit and equipment. That probably means the UK doesn't have to invest in the same equipment. So I think we need to come up with a overarching joint strategy between nations of what we do. Like, our naval power should be one of our primary focuses, in my opinion. I'm obviously ex-armed forces, I'm ex-army, I'm biased on that, but I do believe that being an island nation, we do need to invest more in that. And I think we have an ambitious target for 80% of the fleet to be autonomous. I think that's great. But how does that fit in with what the other countries are doing? And how can we work together to make a secure, strong Europe is probably why I'll be pushing.
Yeah, thanks.
And I'm quite interested in, so another part of the role of it is looking at elections. So how elections have been won, what has happened badly, how there's been foreign interference, and what we need to do to stop that. Because that's another concern to the nation's security, is foreign interference in politics. It's prevalent now. It is not a secret. You know, there are Russian bots everywhere. So how do we stop foreign states influencing European politics is something I would like to dig my teeth into.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I'm just going to bring it down to a more local level now.
Cool.
And I know you've done a lot of work in your constituency and in Swindon. And I even saw that the Prime Minister paid a visit recently, I believe. What do you think that the initiatives that you've tried to champion in Swindon with the Swindon Drone Hub and the company setting up there, what do you think they represent in terms of the UK's defence industry and where we should be heading, maybe in terms of defence and security?
So, I'm obviously going to blow my own trumpet, but I think it is incredibly positive news. I think in my less than 2 years of being an MP, managing to turn a town that had no defence industry into what I'd say is the drone manufacturing hub of the UK now is a positive. I think a lot of people in Swindon are quite thankful for the good jobs and the investment that's coming their way. And I think it could be used as a blueprint model, because outside of this latest investment for the MOD indoor testing facility, a lot of the work that's gone on has had very little government support. You know, when I decided I was going to do this, I reached out to the NATO Defence Investment Fund. I found out who was on Task Force Kindred and not Rapstone, and then I just relentlessly went and lobbied the companies. So I assessed the battlefield, saw who had money, who had contracts, and then I went after them. That didn't need the government to come in and say, we're going to help fund this or we're going to help do that. Like one of the guys, Ben, who's now working at TechEver, I can't remember his second name, that's poor of me, but he's from up north. And before he got the job, he's part of a skills initiative. He was like, why is this happening in Swindon and not up north? It's not because of government support, it's because of lobbying locally. And I think a lot of MPs, if they realised what they could do for relentlessly lobbying and focusing on industry, it doesn't necessarily have to be defence, but they can bring jobs and skills to their region. And yeah, I think it should be replicated.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk a bit more about your approach to that in a bit. But again, on the sort of the local roots of this, what do you think that your experience of championing this has taught you about the role of local communities and local people in supporting an initiative like this?
Yeah, so I think, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, because everything does matter, but we've always been a manufacturing town. So we were kind of primed for it, if that makes sense. Like we were developing railways, Spitfires, then building cars for Honda. So we've always sort of had that manufacturing thing. So it wasn't really a hard thing to get the community to buy into the overarching vision. And it also wasn't a hard sell, because when I was engaging with companies, they were saying, do you have the workforce? I'm like, well, Honda, including the supply chain, needs to be around 15,000 people. So there's a layer from that. Dyson's let people go fairly recently. That gives you skilled engineers and technicians. So it wasn't too challenging. You know? I think we're a proud town which has really good industrial capacity. So the community kind of came on board straight away. Obviously, there's always going to be naysayers and people that don't necessarily want to be contributing towards the war effort. I think it's a defence effort, and I think a lot of these people don't actually understand what it takes to secure your nation. So.
Mm-hmm. And do you think almost the culture of Westminster can be sometimes too removed, or maybe too binary in its approach to the relationship between, say, constituencies and the central government?
I don't know. I don't really do Westminster. To be honest with you, I don't really play in that realm. Like my whole focus has been reindustrialisation and how do we get skilled jobs into my constituency. I don't overly enjoy the Westminster side of it. I will pull the levers and I will lobby the people I need to lobby, but as for me, I'm here to do a job, and that makes Swindon a better place. So some people might get in the Westminster bubble, but I'm trying to keep grounded.
Yeah, and I actually saw your interview on Points West, or I believe you appeared on Points West talking about this, and it kind of went a bit viral. And I'm from Taunton, so not far away, and also watch Points West. So and I thought that your answers to the questions on that were definitely probably a different perspective than maybe a lot of people think about when they think about MPs and the role of an MP. And I just wanted to ask whether you feel like you're maybe sort of slightly redefining the role of an MP, and what you think that an MP's job should be in terms of how they represent and work for the people of their constituency. Yeah,
so I've got quite strong opinions on this, actually. So a lot of people, and this is one of the things that baffles me about this job in general. The public vote for us, but the majority of the public couldn't tell you what your job is. and the majority of MPs couldn't actually tell you or articulate what their job is. I think over the years, and this is probably decades to be honest, I think the role of an MP has been devalued. Originally, if you think what does an MP do, it's legislation and talking in the chamber and putting forward policy. I come at this from a pragmatic standpoint of how do I improve Swindon? That is my focus. So it's how do I make Swindon better? Every decision I take is based around making Swindon better. Is me sitting in the chamber for 2 hours waiting to be called to speak on an issue which is going to have no bearing on government policy, because that's not where the decisions are made, going to make a difference to Swindon? It's not. So I've looked at where the holes were and where we need to fill things. And for me, inward investment and using my title as an MP to get meetings is the best way. Like I just go into this as well. So I still am, I guess. The Labour Party created roles called business champions. Okay, and we got an email, being someone who'd previously been a business owner, got an email from the Parliamentary Labour Party saying, we want you to be a business champion. Give us a call. So I rang up and I was like, okay, what does this mean? They're like, the idea around it is we're going to use business champions to engage with industry, do roundtables, write reports, okay? And it's going to be under the Department of Business and Trade. I was like, okay, that sounds good. What role do you want me to play? They're like, we want you to be the business champion for high streets. And I said, sounds great, not going to do it. I was like, I don't fundamentally think high streets is going to fix Swindon. Love high streets. I've got one in Highworth. The main high street in Swindon is not even in my constituency. So I was like, I'm going to pass. They were like, is there anything you would want to do? I looked down the list. I was like, I want to do defence and green technologies. They're like, you want to do both? I was like, absolutely. The reason for those choices is because I assessed that there was going to be at least 10 years worth of growth in both of those industries. I then used my position as the business champion for defence and green technologies, which is a fairly meaningless position, but it got me through the door talking to industry, held roundtables, had business meetings, started getting some traction. Off the back of that, I took the choice that green technology was too reliant on government grants. So every time a business was going up to scale up, or they were going to try and do something new, they would need a government grant, and I'd be in competition with other MPs. The defence sector didn't need that. So I proceeded forward with the defence sector, and that's why we're in the place to be. But my point being, that was a nonsense role which was developed to keep backbenchers busy. I turned it into a role to get me access to an industry which could help make Swindon flourish. You know, like Lyndon B. Johnson, one of those things is like, whatever position you put me in, I'm going to make that role more important. So that's what I did. And I've gone off on a tangent slightly, but I don't think a lot of MPs and I don't think a lot of the public know what their job is, and people are still trying to find themselves. Yeah. I might be doing the job wrong in a sense, but I've got an idea of where I want to go.
And having been through that kind of process and that journey, have you had any thoughts on what maybe needs to change in terms of how the system in Westminster is designed in order to maybe create more of these opportunities for people to have impact, both in their local areas, but just more generally on issues, and using their position for campaigns or strategies they have in mind?
I'm not really sure. So I think what the government probably needs to do is empower MPs to do more and get them thinking outside the box and championing when things have gone well. Because I think if you give people the opportunity and empower them, they're more likely to do good stuff. So I think that's something the government could do. But it is tough because there's no prerequisite to being an MP, and there's a lot of people that got elected who might not have got elected under the 2019 intake and stuff like that. So we've got a variety of really fantastic individuals, and I guess it's not up to me to say who should be doing what and how they should be doing it. But I think a little bit more support and a little bit more ownership from the government would create a better engagement of MPs. Like if they thought what they were doing mattered more and could see some tangible results, they're more likely to do it. Like it's like when you start going to the gym, like the first couple of weeks it sucks, you don't see any results. Then your bicep starts growing a little bit bigger, and then you're in. So it's like give a little bit more control to some of the backbenchers and make them feel like their decisions are actually making tangible change.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'm fascinated to know actually, what has been your experience and maybe your 2024 cohort's experience of being in government so far, being a backbencher whilst your party's in government. What would you say your reflections are on the experience so far, and how do you see your colleagues talking about this?
So I think it's quite positive. I know like the state of polling isn't great, and there's a lot of anger, and we do need to address. But I was a local councillor in opposition, and that sucks. Like genuinely, being in a position where whatever you put forward, you know the other party's going, no, doesn't matter, is terrible. So I'm incredibly grateful that I am a MP in government, because at least you get access to the conversation. At least you get to put forward ideas and get meetings with ministers. Like you do get meetings in opposition, of course you do, because they can't just not speak to MPs, but it's significantly easier. It's like when I came up with the idea around bringing MOD investment to Swindon, I just texted Marie Eagle, who was the minister at the time, and got a response and set up a meeting. And it might not always be the case if it's like that in opposition. Do you know what I mean? So I love being in government. I love being able to enact change for the country. I think a lot of the MPs are similar, but then I guess at the same time it's all we know as well. You know, unless you were in opposition, then lost your seat and then came back. There's, I believe, 3 MPs that did that. So you've got Douglas Alexander, Heidi Alexander, and Emma Reynolds. I think they're the only ones that were in opposition then re-won that. Maybe James Firth as well, actually. So maybe, and Nick Dakin. All right, that's 5. But yeah, I think most of us, we don't know any different. So we might grumble at times, but it's a good place to be.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll just ask this as a final question. I think it's fair to say that the Labour Party is, you know, in a bit of a turbulent period, and, you know, looking forward to the upcoming by-election. From your perspective and from the things that you're working on in terms of the domestic defence industry and issues around that, where do you see maybe a potential Burnham government going with these questions? Do you think there'll be much of a change in terms of policy? What are you hearing from people inside the party, and what's your sense of where things could head?
So I think the most important thing in that question for me is who becomes the treasurer and who becomes the defence secretary. Because I think obviously Burnham's incredibly popular, he's got some good ideas, but the team around him are what matters for the delivery. I'm really hopeful that Al Khan's comes back to government. I really like him. I think he's got his head switched on, and the stuff he's talking about at the minute is preparing for the future wars is really important. So if we can get the right people in the room, I don't think the conversation changes. And I think it's the responsibility of MPs like myself to lobby whoever is in charge to try and make them focus on defence. But it's going to be interesting. I'm not really looking forward to the leadership challenge. I think there's going to be a lot of hostility in-house fighting, which the public don't deserve. They deserve better than that. But yeah, we've just got to try and keep on the straight and narrow and make sure that we can support our country's security.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Sorry.